Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So this time it's going to be a review of my ETC list for the European Team Championships. This year I'm going to be playing Dread Elves instead of Empire of Sunstad last year, and it's the list that I present you right now. It's a bit more of a balanced list, and that is something that works quite nicely, I would say, for Dread Elves. You can also make lists that pair quite well against some opponents and then pair a bit worse against some others. But I feel that with Dread Elves, your combat power is going to be decent enough anyway in most matchups where the very good matchup lists would also be suitable. So I think there's a bit of a gain to get by playing a bit more of a balanced list. So this list has quite a lot of tricks up its sleeve, and we will just go through everything one by one. So first things we have in the army are the characters. I have a Dread Prince on a Raptor, double Warlock Outcast, and I have a Temple Exarch BSB. The Dread Prince on Raptor you could see on the previous screen as Duskforge, Basalt Infusion, Lance with a Shield Breaker, and the Ring of the Obsidian Thrones. This gives him a 1-up rerollable armor save and a 3-up Aegis against flaming attacks. In the list you can see that I don't have any cavalry units, so the guy doesn't really have any unit to hide in. The only unit he could hide in are the Shadow Riders, and that's a 5-man unit, so if they take 1 wound then he can be targeted in the unit as well. Some people find this an issue and they play Dread Knights. I thought about that and I considered not to do that. I mostly see this Dread Prince as an upgrade to the army, as a piece that in some matchups is just truly gold, and in some others he struggles a bit, like the ones with bolt throwers, but then again the army already struggles a bit against shooting heavy armies, so I don't really want to see these anyway. So in an ETC pairing this works quite nicely because you try to avoid these matchups anyways. And still against bolt throwers I still have quite some line of sight blocking units in my army, like all the chariots and the Divine Altar. They block units, block line of sight for bolt throwers, trying to see my Dread Prince. Now the Dread Prince himself, he has the Lance with Shieldbreaker, because I think Shieldbreaker is a very good grinding tool, just denying your opponent's armor save entirely. And the Dread Prince chassis already has enough damage output, with 5 attacks that often hit on 2+, with offensive skill 8 I believe, and +1 to hit. And then strength 4 with +1 to wound is also not even that bad. Shieldbreaker caps you at a 3+ to wound, so there will be some scenarios where I will be facing the fact that I can only wound on a 3+, but the AP6 really just changes stuff, with everybody with a 1-up armor save just not having the armor save at all anymore. And in Dread Elves in general, AP is sometimes a bit of a struggle, like most units have a maximum of AP2, which is quite decent. And then you have the Judicators who are AP4, which is incredible. But Judicators, I think, suffer in some other ways. So this guy, he still has the Basalt Infusion for a 3-up Aegis against Alchemy Magic, most notably. And then, well, he has the Ring of the Obsidian Thrones. That makes it so that he can take matchups that other units in the army cannot really take, because if I lose a combat by 3, for example, then this guy will still stick around probably, especially in range of the BSB. And especially also if I cast the Hereditary of Divination on him. So it's the one tool in the army that can actually grind pretty well. Most combats he will not lose by more than 3. He can also still boost the unit with his 5 attacks. It's not really his role. His role is more to just lock stuff in combat, grind stuff out, in a role that the rest of the army cannot really do. Then we have the Warlock Outcasts and the Temple Exarch BSB. So together they form my magic phase, basically. The Warlock Outcasts, I have 1 on Cosmology Adept, 1 Witchcraft Adept. Then the Temple Exarch has the Essence of a Free Mind, so she can choose between Alchemy and Divination and the Book of Arcane Mastery. So I always have the number 1 spell of the lore, and I also have a number 2, 3, or 4 spell, but I cannot choose the Hereditary with this mage. So the Hereditary for Dread Elves, in generally, it used to be kind of okay, and then they changed it around so you can only use it once per phase even, and that basically kills the spell for me. Um, because in the end you're casting on an 8 plus a spell that can just do it. It does 6 strength 4 hits. It can be in combat, so it can count towards combat res. And then in the moments where it shines, it can shine pretty bright, such that opponents think that it's quite strong. But an 8 plus to cast spell, I usually expect it to be able to deal more than at least 6 wounds. And even in combat, if you get a reroll to wound or reroll to hit, +1 to hit, anything, then it's likely gonna have more damage output than just 6 strength 4 AP2 hits. Also, the spell with 6 strength 4 AP2, it's kind of situational when it's useful. Like, for example, against cowboys, it's most notably not that useful. And a lot of the other spells that Dread Elves have access to fix issues that this spell also fixes. So there's not really any bonus I find to the hereditary. So that is all about why I don't mind getting the Book of Arcane Mastery on my BSB. BSB also still has the Legion standard, that is to couple a bit stronger with the Beast Breakers, but I'll get into that later. So in terms of magic setup with the Cosmo Adept and the Witchcraft Adept and the either Divination or Alchemy Mage, basically my spell selection boils down to the essence of a free mind choice that I have to make. If my opponent has multiple cowboys that are vulnerable to Quicksilver Lash, I'll take Alchemy. If my opponent has a lot of units that have AP 0, then I will want to have Word of Iron. And then if my opponent has a lot of units that basically go for the grind but don't have that much damage output, I tend to go for Divination, mostly because of the attribute. So I prefer to take Divination, and also against, well, obviously against Demon Legions, I prefer to take Divination for Fate's Judgment. Likewise, some races have War Machines that really don't like getting D6 wounds right away, as long as they don't have an armor save that good. So then I also tend to take Divination, as well as for Scrying, which can be quite a boost for the army. So it is a bit risky to cast Scrying on 5 dice. 4 dice kind of makes it like 70% of the time, I believe. So it's not the best spell, I would say. But then again, the rest of the magic allows me to do quite a hefty anti-gunline setup. It also allows me to just go for full combat boosts. It even allows me to go for a little bit of range damage. So in terms of range damage, I could go for Eyes on Fire and the Hereditary and Quicksilver Lash. In terms of combat boosts, the best setup would be probably Glory of Gold, or, well, depending on the opponent, Know Thy Enemy and another Divination boost, such as Stars Align. And then on Cosmo, I usually take Perception of Strength and Truth of Time. And then on Witchcraft, I tend to take Deceptive Glamour and the Wheel Turns. Wheel Turns I have been taking for some time. I find it not that useful in the end because I am anyway going to be hit on a 4 plus. I am anyway hitting on better than 4 plus, so basically that is not any advantage to me. Wounding on less than 4 plus doesn't really, or better, worse than 4 plus doesn't really happen for my army. Wounding on 4 plus against me, that is the one situational occasion where it really shines. But then again, 8 plus to cast, basically for -2 to wound. It doesn't really compete that strongly against other spells that I have access to anyway, and it's a defensive spell, and with Dread Elves, generally I find that the offensive spells are better, because you really want to just obliterate the enemy unit before he can strike back. Because your defensive profile, you can try to boost it, but there's no use to it really anyway. So Witchcraft-wise, Deceptive Glamour definitely. And Twisted Effigy is also quite nice. There's a lot of people that play a Wizard Master or some character that is really focused on magic, and then Twisted Effigy already shines. There's also a lot of armies that have like 1 or 2 shooting units that I really would like to shut down, and Twisted Effigy does a good job at that. So yeah, about shooting, anti-shooting, Twisted Effigy is the #1 spell to go for. So the anti-shooting setup for me would be Twisted Effigy, Raven's Wing, Altered Side, Eyes on Fire probably, and then on the Divination Mage quite likely, Scrying. another enemy. So I could still then alter item fire for perception of strength still, or truth of time to get earlier into combat. Um, but that is kind of the flexibility that I have with this magic setup. There are some people that say that my defenses on the Temple Exarch are not good enough. I find that generally she's quite okay. Because the biggest danger for her is snipes and magic damage before I enter combat. However, with the setup that I have, a lot of people focus on other stuff in the list anyway, and they kind of ignore the BSB. I think mostly because the Dread Prince looks still quite juicy, and in that sense, he also protects the BSB from any damage. There's some supposedly scary tools in the army that make that the opponent's attention is going to be divided amongst different targets. And even if my opponent really focuses on the BSB, then all my other pieces that would be quite vulnerable to the same type of magic, they are going to arrive. So in my army, I don't really mind not having any extra protection on my BSB. And still in combat, it's defense 5 with a 4-up Aegis. So most cases, it's quite fine. And I still have a champion in the unit anyway to just accept some challenges. Then we go to the core section, basically most of the core section of the army. So these are mostly support units. It's the 2x15 auxiliaries and a unit of Shadow Riders. The auxiliaries are mostly in the list to just put some pressure on my opponent, more than their actual range damage output, to be honest. Because a lot of people are quite afraid of those, and I think they are quite right. As an opponent, I feel like you cannot really do anything against their shooting because of march and shoot mostly. So they are quite mobile and they have quite a lot of threat range. The units are also big enough to withstand some damage. Like if you do a fireball on them, they don't really care that much. One of the units has a banner of discipline because one of the units is likely going to be out of range of the BSB, and the other is going to be in range, providing the Academy Train bonus also to the Obsidian Guard that's later in the list. Together with the Obsidian Guard triggering Academy Trained, they are quite a good unit to hold up stuff like monsters as well. Because usually monsters, they try to kill units like this by just charging in, doing some damage, leaving one rank of volley fire kind of units, archers, whatever, and then breaking the unit. These guys, however, if they have one rank and they're within 8 inches of either the other unit or the Obsidian Guard, they will still be steadfast, so then they are quite likely to stick, and especially if I do take the divination, then with minimized discipline, they can really stick around quite nicely. So they are more of a, yeah, kind of like an anvil. So they push up, they just need to stay there for one round basically, because then I have my counter charges ready. And then, meanwhile, they can still suppress the opponent with their shots. Sometimes the shots are more effective than at other times. And the thing you mostly run up against is the fact that they're AP0. So against infantry, yes, you do 30 shots. Yes, you do 10 hits, 5 wounds, and then after saves, it's like 3 wounds. So it starts really scary with the 30 shots. But compared to like highborn elf archers that hit on 3 plus, you are gonna do some more damage, but it's likely gonna be 1 wound more, maybe 2. Um, but against monsters, they really outperform stuff like highborn elf archers because they're likely gonna be um, within the 18-inch range if they really want to put some pressure. So you're already hitting on 4 plus and then 6s. You're gonna be able to do like 2 to 3 wounds before saves. So yeah, they are mostly just utility units, and then the Shadow Riders. I used to think before I started to play Dread Elves again after the new book was released that with the +1 to wound they would be quite good, especially with the shields, giving them a 4-up armor save in combat. In fact, in the end, it doesn't really matter that much because it's only 5 attacks. They're not gonna break that many units. So the only advantage they really have is that they can also withhold a charge from enemy chaff quite nicely. because the riders do strike at the same time as the charging enemy quite often, or even before with agility 5. And the horses at agility 4, they also strike quite quickly. So enemy charging my Shadow Riders, I'm not really that scared of. They will likely hold me in place for one turn, but other than that, they won't really do that much. Shadow Riders charging war machines, it's quite reliable to just get rid of an enemy war machine, because the profile is just good enough. And otherwise, yeah, 18-inch march is just fantastic. So it's a great utility unit. If you play Shadow Riders, then you probably know. Then we get to the combat blocks of the army. Basically, I have 3 combat blocks, which is the Beast Breakers, the Thunder Pack, and the Obsidian Guard. So the Beast Breakers, they will nearly always, actually just always, have the Crucible of Slaughter in them. And I find that this gives me quite a nice utility unit. The 3 units that I have are very different, but against a lot of targets, they do basically the same thing, which is just destroy the unit. So the Beast Breakers, advantages of the Beast Breakers, I find, I think it's the best unit in Dread Elves to have the Crucible of Slaughter in, because in this unit the Crucible actually boosts the damage output of your unit, whereas in the other units your rank of file strikes basically as hard as the Crucible itself. But the Crucible gives you 9 attacks instead of the total of 11 attacks that the Beast Breakers would give. And then in addition now with the Crucible you get another 5 attacks from the Beast Breakers. So if the Temple Exarch is also in the unit, then I get to a total of, let me see, 13, 17 attacks. Most of them they all have battle focus actually. They mostly hit on 2+, most of it has AP1. And it's boostable by spells pretty nicely with the Blades of Darak on both the Temple Exarch and the Crucible of Slaughter. So the damage output of this unit is not even that bad. And then, well, you have 2 banners in the unit, you have 4 ranks, so you're at a static combat res of 6, which is unique in Dread Elves. This is something that you cannot really achieve with any other unit other than just a ranked unit that's 5 broad, basically. You can do it with spears. I think the advantage of having the Crucible is that you can also tank like a catapult hit. Obviously, for my opponent, it's quite attractive to shoot with the catapult at the Crucible, because then you can put some wounds on the Crucible and you still get to hit some rank of file. On the other hand, it can survive a round of shooting, because the Crucible still has a 5 up Aegis, it still has 5 wounds. So even if my opponent does like 3 wounds or 4 wounds with a catapult and I get unlucky, then it's still functional. And my opponent still has to get lucky to knock off the last couple of wounds on the Crucible. Also, it being advanced 5 means that it usually it follows basically the rest of the army a bit, because the rest of the army is a bit quicker. It really draws out enemy fire, and it is a surprisingly killy unit in itself, I would say. So the Beast Breakers themselves, they give parry, and they give cannot be stomped to the Temple Exarch as well, and they cannot be stomped themselves. So you have a unit with static combat res of 6 that cannot be stomped, so if there's any monster that goes into this unit, it's gonna be quite disappointed, I think. So even like a Gorgon in the flank, it would have to do its 6 hits in order to really win combat. Obviously in the flank it's gonna have a big flank, it's gonna have a charge. So then I will be losing by like 3 or something if it does 6 wounds with its close combat attacks, and if I don't do any wounds back. But it's quite likely that that I will still at least hold. And then if I get to reform, then it's probably bad news for the Gorgon. Then otherwise we have the Thunder Pack. Thunder Pack are quite surprising in the amount of damage that comes out of them. So I used to play 3 Gorgons. I am convinced now by the 4 Thunder Pack. They're most likely more or less the same point costs, but the Thunder Pack, I feel they're just a better unit overall. With not being as dependent on the enemy having actually a good armor save to really perform well with your stair attacks of the Gorgons. These guys, they just hit reliably with hatred. They do reliable damage, and I don't really have any complaints about them. Sand of Blood and the Beast Breakers together also gets them up to advance 8. My magic still can boost them with the attribute of Witchcraft to advance 9. Truth of Time would get them to advance 10. People don't expect that, and that is also quite great. Then the Obsidian Guard, yeah, in the list with this magic, I think it's also quite nice. So they do have the Cadron's Pennon to get Sand of Blood and to get Swift Stride. So they start with advance 5 base, and then they go to advance 6 because of Academy trained. Then they go to advance 7 because of Sand of Blood. And then with Truth of Time or Witchcraft, I can go to advance 8 or 9, and that is actually quite fast for an infantry unit. Why do I prefer Obsidian Guard over Judicators? So Obsidian Guard I can still run in ranked formation 7 wide instead of horde formation, which is kind of necessary for Judicators. And then for Judicators, I feel that flank charges are way more harmful mostly because you are normally in horde formation. So you're going to have one attack each back to the flank. That is the downside. So you're going to have 3 attacks to the flank. You're not going to have any combat res except for your standard. So you will likely lose combat. You're going to be discipline 8. You can be steadfast likely, but you might not even be steadfast at the end of combat. And then you're only discipline 8. So with fear, you're going to be discipline 7. Yeah, if you take the Sand of Blood banner, you will not have any negative effects of fear, but yeah, that's a good argument. But then again, the advantages of Obsidian Guard with just 2 attacks each. Even if I lose 7 models now, I still get the same damage output. I still get the same amount of attacks as Judicators would get, more or less. And I would say that Obsidian Guard is still quite buffable by magic, whilst Judicators are not really that buffable. So the only thing I think you can do with Judicators is that you increase their offense and defense so that you're less likely to be hit back, I think. Because you already have Hatred, so you cannot really boost your to hit roll any further than that. You're already gonna hit like 90% of your attacks against targets that have defensive 4 or lower. And then yeah, your agility is something that you have to boost with Judicators because you're gonna have to strike first. Obsidian Guard already started agility 6, and that can actually make a difference quite a lot of times. Coupled with the discipline 9, coupled with the offensive and defensive 6, and I think that the damage output is quite similar. Sure, if you have a cowboy that goes into my Obsidian Guard, then it will stay there for a bit longer. But also in the list, I have my Dread Prince on the Raptor, so that's a good solution to the cowboy. Also, with defensive 6, I can easily boost it to defensive 8, then even cowboys hit on 4+, so I can likely tank the enemy cowboy with my unit. I just think Obsidian Guard at this point definitely are better than Judicators. Now we have the support of the list, so right now it's kind of obligatory to run double hunting chariots because 3 shots at 3+ to hit with accurate quick to fire. Strength 6 AP3 is just quite insane. And then even the Swift Stride removal. So I would be happy with just the Swift Stride removal, I think. It would be nice to be able to do some damage, so maybe like 4 Strength 5 AP2 shots to make it a bit more aligned with the bolt thrower as well. But I think yeah, 3 shot Strength 6 AP3 is just golden. Because basically you can just whittle down enemy cavalry, you can whittle down enemy monsters cavalry. Taking down Swift Stride is huge, especially if I myself have a lot of charge range pressure in my units. Mostly also still with Witchcraft and Truth of Time. And then yeah, these chariots, they just perform really well every single time I put them on the table. So it's still a hassle for the opponent to get rid of them. The opponent kind of has to focus on them because otherwise these guys will just rank up damage. And then to support this, I previously played a character inside of my Obsidian Guard with like 8 strength 4 attacks, which was also quite nice. But then I realized I didn't really need it, and also the character made the unit 400 points more expensive, such that losing the Obsidian Guard meant that actually I wasn't doing that well anymore. So now I took the character out, I replaced it with 2 Raptor Chariots, and I will never go back again. Because these Raptor Chariots are also quite nice. They're nice first drops at the start of the game, because I can just drop one. It will eventually be in the right spot, more or less. And even if it isn't, it's only 190 points that I basically lose in terms of combat prowess on the field, and it will catch up with the rest of the army anyway. Um, and on the charge, they can be absolutely brutal. So normally they have an advance of 7, 8 with Scent of Blood, and then I can boost it with the Beast Breakers to 9, boost it with some magic if I want to, but usually it's other units that receive the boosts. But advance 9 for a chariot is just, it's really good. And then on the charge, well, the crew has 2 attacks each, so it's 4 attacks. Offensive 6, I believe, so often 2+2 hit, with strength 6 on the charge with the lances with +1 to wound. So people are quite surprised when you come in with an elven chariot at effectively strength 7 with AP3, with 4 attacks, with battle focus within range of the cauldron. And then the 2 raptors that still do 4 attacks, strength 4 with lethal strike. I don't know why they have lethal strike, but they also sometimes just chip in a wound or two. And yeah, these chariots for 190 points, they are just quite good. I know that a lot of people complain that they're not Resilience 5. No, they are not. But yeah, they just wreck stuff by themselves. Um, yeah, it's quite good. So in total, that is the list that I'm gonna play. Thinks it's best that list, just combat stuff basically. So if the opponent has a combat-oriented list, then usually I manage to pull through. Also because I get to dictate a lot of the movement, and I also get to dictate where we are gonna go for a grind basically with the Dread Prince, most notably. And if the opponent has a lot of shooting, like Infernal Dwarf, Gunline armies, they are very bad matchups. But that is something that you will never circumvent, I feel, with Dread Elves. I have learned a bit better to deal with Infernal Dwarf Gunlines, making it sometimes a very dicey matchup. But stuff like that and normal Dwarf Gunlines, it's definitely a downhill battle. Yeah, so let's see how I will perform at TTC. And well, by the time this video is going to be released, we will be playing. So you can track online how it's going. I wish everyone at the tournament all the best, and I will see you then next time.